Everyone? All right. Thank you guys so much for coming and to this special Sharefaith Academy webinar. My name is Zach, and if you guys have not been to a Sharefaith Academy webinar before, welcome. Hope to get some good information for you guys here. Make good use of your time. I know that there's plenty busyness going on in your lives today, and I appreciate you guys so much for taking the time to join us and being able to dive into this subject. So just a few things. If this is the first time you've been with us, or maybe if you want a refresher, you should see me in the video player here, and down below the player you want to be able to keep your screen open to where you can see the chat going on, so that way if you guys have any questions about anything, or if you have any comments at all during the webinar, we'd love to hear from you guys, and just let us know that you can hear us, can see us all right. Pop in there, say hi, maybe tell us where you're from, city and state you're located in, and we'll go ahead and get started here pretty soon. Before we do, I want to pray, and then we'll begin. Father God, we thank you for this time today. We thank you for the opportunity that we have as communicators to communicate your gospel, Lord, to be able to reach others with it and be able to be a part of lives that can be transformed by your Spirit, God. We ask that you would use us, that you would use this time wisely as we dive into this subject matter to help us see where areas are that we can improve on, that we can build upon, and Lord, that we can just be fruitful in the endeavors that you have for us going forward. We thank you and we love you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys, so before we switch back over to the presentation, I just want to say as we dive into these materials, I'm going to go through and talk about a lot of different subjects, a lot of different resources that we can go at, different channels of communication. I just want to stress, though, how important it is, the point of personal communication. Nothing that we have is going to supersede personal relationships with people and being real people transformed by the gospel, reaching others with the gospel. So I just want to stress that. I don't feel like I can stress it enough, and I feel like sometimes we get caught up so much in the analytics side of things and the data side of things that we lose sight of that sometimes. So I just want to encourage you with that before we move forward, and then we'll go ahead and take a turn and look at some digital communication resources. Before we do, though, Chris, if you want to switch it back over to the presentation for me real quick. This is just some words of inspiration for you guys that I wanted to share, and this is from Seth Godin, who's a popular blogger and entrepreneur, but I felt like this is just so applicable to the topic we have. His words of inspiration for us today: how can you squander even one more day not taking advantage of the greatest shifts of our generation? How dare you settle for less when the world has made it so easy for you to be remarkable? Now, of course, he's probably talking about it in like a leadership business kind of standpoint, but let's take this thought into this discussion with us and think about how we can be remarkable as communicators, as evangelists, as pastors, as leaders within our churches, and that we spread that same mentality in our team with us today. So let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to go ahead and discuss some of these digital communication resources before we move on into some other subject material. And so we'll mix in a bit of the new with the old and maybe some fresh concepts on ways that we can use it better. So let's look at digital communication first. I've got these 6 dancing boxes for us here, and so we're going to go through each one of these. I'm going to spend a bit of time on each one, kind of peel apart some of the layers a bit on these, maybe give some ideas and insight into them, and then of course if you guys have questions at all while this is happening, feel free to hop on the chat, let us know. I have my good friend and colleague Chris here who is going to be on chat with you guys. He's chatting with you right now, in fact, so as things come in, and then at the very end we'll have a live Q&A. Sorry I didn't mention that beforehand, but just so you know, we will have a live question and answer time at the end for you guys. So, all right, so as you can see from these dancing boxes, we've got websites, social media, emails, mobile apps, announcement slides, and live streaming. These are all areas of digital communication we'll get into. There's even more, but I just wanted to make sure we had enough time to cover these ones, and then we'll get into the rest later. All right, so the first one we're going to dive into is our church website. And our church website is easily one of the most important ones that we know of. I wrote this little tagline here: a church website is essentially your silent spokesperson on the web. Your website is a major priority. So let's talk about the 6 things that I feel every church website needs to have and do effectively. So the first thing we're going to talk about, because some of this is going to be very elementary, I know. I don't know where everybody's coming in at, if this is a brand new thing for trying to figure this out, or if you guys are been doing this for a while, so bear with me. I'm going to make sure I'm covering all my bases throughout this webinar. So the first thing I want to bring up is service times. Now, you might think, okay, that's obvious. You want to have service times on your website. For some reason, though, this sometimes gets missed by churches, and according to research, this is actually the most looked for thing when people come to a church website. When they get to your site, the main thing that they're concerned about with at least a majority of the people is the service times. They want to know when and where they can go to attend the church service. So huge thing you need to make sure you have. Secondly, your address. Okay, again, might seem basic, but for some people out there, they just miss this somehow. But the thing with the address is not only is it good, of course, to have just a mark where, just have it listed so people know where it is, but with the way websites work these days and how things integrate with different things like Google Maps or Apple Maps or any of those programs, you can actually be able to embed a Google map onto your website. You can have it set so somebody, like on phones nowadays, you can just tap on it and it pulls up the GPS in the phone to be able to give them directions straight to your church. So there's a lot of great ways that addresses are working online. On top of this, though, and this is just a little fun fact, for search engine optimization reasons, it's recommended to have a Google map embedded on your contact page or wherever your address is listed at. And it's shown that it may actually give a little boost to your search engine results by having that. So that's a good thing to know as well. Whether or not that's the case, I feel like a Google map is a great way, or any type of embedded map really, to make things more dynamic on your site and have it be more accessible for more people. And this is a big one too, and I think like this is maybe a major thing that we see some churches hit or miss real well. Setting expectations. And what I mean by that is when somebody comes to your website, it can be one thing if somebody comes to your website and they see like this really old, outdated website that hasn't been taken care of. That sets expectations for them that you guys aren't really paying much attention to this, or nobody's really working on it out of the church, or there's something not happening, not clicking right anywhere, and that can throw some red flags. Alternatively, it can be sometimes when a church has like all this stock photography and like this massive, like professional looking things, and then they come to the church and it doesn't really look like that at all. It doesn't. You don't see any of the people you saw on the website. Some people get so concerned over the image that they don't even provide real images of themselves. You should make sure that if you have pictures of people, that you have their permission to do so, and then you should have those pictures, of your people in your church if you're going to have that kind of stuff. Or even if you're not going to do that, you can use other designs. You don't have to use stock photography necessarily. It can be helpful sometimes when you're really just trying to illustrate maybe like what a ministry is about in your church or something of that nature, but I wouldn't use that as a means of like advertising this is our church here when it's not. So be careful about how you set expectations and what your visuals say about your website, and the rest of the way that it's put together, how that says about your church, I should say, not your website, but your church itself, because that's really what people are looking to your website for. All right, and then apart from this, the fourth thing, contact details. Now, with contact details, there can be different ways that we can provide this. Either you can have something that's a very generic contact information, like something that's just, say, to the church. If your church has a phone, itself that goes to a secretary, someone there, you can have that available on the contact page, having a generic address or email address that they can contact for basic information. But if you're going to have ways that people can reach specific individuals, then you want to make sure you're doing so in a secure manner. You have to be careful because, unfortunately, the web is all full of spam and bots and stuff that goes out there that looks for this type of stuff and will just hit your inbox hard if you have your personal email address listed on your church website. So be careful about that. You can protect yourself by using like a contact form that has a CAPTCHA, one of those verification systems in it, which is that's something that's usually pretty easy to find an option for out there, or providing in a way that at least it's secure, so you're not getting just random bots coming across and finding that information. But in any case, you should have contact information available. So however you can do that in a way on your site so that people can come to it, and if they have questions about your church, they have an option where they can go to be able to get that information. You should definitely make yourself accessible to your website visitors. Online giving. This is so huge nowadays, and I think it's something that some churches are still on the fence about. We're not sure exactly yet how we should be handling online giving. I can tell you, though, as transitions continue to occur in our generation and our use of technology, even in older generations, like this is becoming more commonplace to use online methods of payment for everything. And so, you know, for example, like I don't carry checks. I don't even carry cash like 99% of the time with me, and I know that I'm very much in the same boat as most of society. Most people are just not carrying around that kind of stuff anymore. We're used to doing everything online. We're used to using our credit cards. Chris is showing me cash. All right, yeah, okay, all right, Chris. one of the few. No, you know, and it's like some people do, obviously, but you think about how many people nowadays are switching to web-based platforms to be able to give through, and it's staggering the numbers. I mean, and there are surveys done, like they're showing something like 40% of people say that they wish their church had an online giving option because that would make it so much easier for them and faster for them to be able to tithe. And it's like, yeah, I make the mistake even when I wasn't tithing online. I would come in and I'd be like, oh, that's right, like I meant to bring in my check this week, or I meant to bring in the cash that was from that and I forgot. And that was just a common thing because it wasn't a normal thing for me to have that on me. And this is becoming more and more typical. So having online giving is really becoming a standard now for churches, and should be something that your church has at least looked into and is researching, if not already implemented a method for that. And once you have it, making sure that it's available in easy spot location on their website. So when they go to it, it should be clearly marked either in your main navigation or somewhere that's connected to a relative menu item. So like even like the resources or contacts page or anything like that where you might find something like that. And then this is a big one, current information. I kind of touched on this a little bit with setting expectations, but this is perhaps the biggest bane of church websites that we deal with, is just like having things updated, having things kept current. This doesn't mean that you have to go through every month and do a major overhaul of your website and redo all the banners and stuff. It's like if you don't have the team or the power or the manpower for that, I get it. But at the same time, you should at least still have, say, like the most recent sermon audio that you've uploaded. You should have maybe something that's dynamically updated, like a blog page that can have some new content put on it every week, every couple of weeks, just so that people can see, like, okay, this is still being updated, this information is current, I can trust it, and I can see that this church cares about its online outreach. So those are all things that tells someone subliminally when they see, like, this website is up to date. Otherwise, if they're looking back and go, wow, this is like from April of this year, you know, or it's, you know, whatever, like that's the most recent thing, like that throws a red flag. It's like, is this church like still around, or are they like just not updating this? Do they not have anyone who can do this? There will be a lot of things that come up on someone's mind when they see it, and you can probably vouch the same thing. You've probably thought the same thing before coming to any organization's website, and you see outdated content and you're just immediately like, nope, out. Not even interested after this. So that's a very important one, and I know people don't like it because it means you have to go in and do something, but it's just like, it doesn't have to be a big stressor. It doesn't have to be something that you have to spend hours and hours on every time. It literally can take you 10, 15 minutes just to go in and update a few things just so it's reflecting current information. So that's a big thing that will make a huge impact on how likely your website is to bring visitors as well. All right, so we've talked about church websites a bit, and again, if you guys have more questions about that, feel free, go ahead and throw them in there, and Chris is fielding a lot of them, and then we'll get to them as we get further along as well. But for the next part, because I want to make sure I have time to cover all these areas, we're going to talk about social media. Now, some of you guys might have been to the Sharefaith. We actually had a social media webinar a couple months ago that you can find later if you need to. But I want to talk a bit about social media because there's some things in terms of like the communication, kind of the bigger picture of church communication. It's the best way to show your culture and community online. Now, here's an interesting statistic. This is a little bit of an older survey. This is from Pew Research, or sorry, not Pew Research. BuzzPlant did a survey in 2014 of churches. Now, this is a few years old, so in social media years, that can be a lot. But at the time in 2014, according to churches, they were saying that social media was effective. 46.1%. Sorry, I got to get my sentences in a row here. 46.1% of churches said that social media was the most effective outreach method for them. And this is over, like, I was kind of surprised actually, because then they say like the second was knocking on doors. I figured like, oh, if you're going out and meeting people in person, like that's probably most effective. Now there could be a number of reasons why, and it could be, you know, the church's strategy and how they approach stuff like that. But social media is by and far the largest one out of all of them in terms of what churches who were surveyed said was the most effective in reaching more people. So that's very interesting. And then you have some other methods in here that I don't even see a lot of churches using nowadays. Stuff like newspaper, radio, TV. Like I'm sure that those numbers have probably just plummeted in the past few years. I could be wrong, but at least where I am, I don't see much of that activity here. But so that's an important statistic to look at then. So that tells us social media has a huge potential for us to be able to reach and engage more. I have a couple different samples of social media posts that just mocked up to show you guys some examples of different ways that a social media graphic could perform. So here I have two different examples. On the left you see one, it says your Christmas invitation, and then it has information saying when this Christmas event is. And then obviously this is just a graphic. This doesn't have to be the entire social post. I can include a caption with this that can perhaps provide some more detail, such as where, what's going on during this Christmas event. What, you know, is this a service? Is this a a potluck, or just some type of external event for it? So you can think of ways that you could, put this, provide some more information here. But the alternative here, like I have another one that's more of a sermon graphic. So this is something that would be useful for like just saying like, hey, this is our current sermon series. No other name has a tagline associated with it, so they can understand these are the things that are being talked about. Now between the two though, what do you think was most likely to get more engagement? I would say that the Christmas one will get more engagement because not only does it have just a little bit more information, but it kind of has a call to action in a sense, because it's giving them the time and day that this event is taking place. So you can include a call to action that they can follow through on this, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we look at more resources here. But you should always think of like, what is the goal of this post? Am I just trying to let people know like, hey, this is our sermon series, like this one is? Or am I saying like, look, you're invited. This is your invitation. I'm inviting you. Here's the time and day that this is taking place. Come be a part of it. So there's a different feeling behind this one. And you'll notice too, of course, the logo of the church is on both posts. So that way people who see this can instantly recognize who this is associated with, and your branding is an essential part of that as well. Branding is oftentimes a marketing term we don't like to include, but it just means that it's what people identify with your church. When they see something like this, like your church logo, they can immediately recognize like this, oh, this is part of such and such church. So that's an important thing to include with all of your resources as well. And again, I've probably some people are like, man, you're just scratching the surface of stuff, and I know, I just want to get through this and make sure that you guys get to see all this stuff here, and we'll have some more time at the end with questions to be able to go even further if you guys want to on some of these subjects. So, okay, so this one, you guys are probably going to be like, email, that's so 1990s. Like, man, thinking of like back to the days of AOL email and everything. But email, whether we like it or not, after all these years, email still reigns as the undisputed king of digital communication. So what do I mean by that? Well, with email communication, let's talk through the process of it real quick here. With getting emails, you want to first collect your email addresses. Now this could be through simply giving cards or information to people in your congregation to fill out for you. This could be through an online registration form on your website and being able to get that information from them that way. But collecting email addresses, obviously building your list for people that you want to be able to engage with and interact with, whether they're coming to events, coming to services, finding your church online, however that might be, you want to use those resources to be able to gather your list and get those email addresses for the people. And obviously this, you want to make it clear like what these email addresses, what you plan to do. Like, I'm going to send you more information about the church. I'm going to keep you updated on the events happening here. I'm going to let you know what's going on with the current mission and vision of our church. Those kinds of things should be brought up front, and then that way people are understanding, okay, this is what I'm giving my information for, and I want to be included on this information. Secondly, as you develop these lists, you want to be able to create unique lists and groups for yourself. So you'll have people who are signing up specifically for a retreat, let's say. And so that people, you want to let them know as it's getting closer, you want to send them reminders and keep them informed on what's happening with that. Versus the people who are maybe more interested in the general information of like, hey, these are all the events going on at our church, this is what's happening here, and you can give them the option if they want to be part of that as well. So you can include them on both. And so we'll talk a little bit about systems here that let you do things like this. But this is something to keep in mind, is that you're not necessarily sending the same message to everybody all the time, but you may want to have specific information that goes to only certain people. And of course, like if you're working internally too, like how you split up things that go to your staff, to your volunteers, to other members of your leadership who are going to be involved in these things. So having a mindset that you're not going to necessarily broadcast the same message to the general audience every single time. All right, so now here's the thing, using your email marketing service. This is a big one. So again, I know people don't like using the word marketing sometimes, but that's the best way to describe what these do. So using an email marketing service or a CHMS, meaning church management system, different tools available that you can put to use to be able to do these kinds of things for you. Don't just rely on your Gmail or your Microsoft Outlook to send if you're doing a massive list. I see this still a lot in churches where people who are not really, and I think more of it is an ignorance thing, just not knowing what's available to them. That's what they know, so they just jump into that and they go, okay, I got to CC 300 people on this list to get the word out there about this stuff. And I know people personally who still do stuff like that for major functions for organizations, and so I just want to reach out to them gently and be like, look, there's a better way. So look into email marketing services. Ones that I recommend that I've seen a lot of churches use, and I know that we've had some experience with here at Sharefaith even, is like MailChimp, which is a great one. I think, like, especially when you're getting started, if you're a smaller group, MailChimp is great because it allows you to have, I think, something up to like 2,000 emails on a list that you can send to for free. So look into MailChimp as an option, and they offer all these abilities to be able to create nice looking emails, break up your groups, and send it out to different lists even. And then apart from MailChimp, there's also services like Constant Contact, which is a good one too, and they have some things that are nice specifically for churches as well. They have a market or a demographic they think of for churches and stuff. So there are premium options for both those services that you can look into. And there's even more too as you get into it that might, just based on your own personal preference of user interface and different features they have, you can dive into. But I think those are two great starting points for you, MailChimp and Constant Contact, to explore and see if that could be something for your emails that can make you have better emails going through your church. And one thing I kind of touched on with what MailChimp lets you do, give your emails a professional appearance. So we don't need to just do the plain text emails all the time. Oftentimes when I do that, like that tells me, like if I'm getting a plain text email, that's like, somebody I know personally is sending that to me, which can be good. Sure, you can do that. That would be fine if that's what you feel like is best for your group, for your congregation that you're sending to. But a lot of times if you're doing something that's like a newsletter or like a major announcement or anything like that, or something that you want other people to be able to share with others, then you should include some type of a graphic with that. Include your branding in that. Even if it's just a simple header image across the top that has your logo, and then from there having just different sections broken up with what's going on. If anybody subscribes to the Sharefaith magazine newsletter, or even you guys saw like from what we send out with Sharefaith Academy, we always make sure that our logo is front and center up there so you know who it's from, and then we break it down as well as we can so that way you guys can easily distinguish, like, okay, he's talking about this right here and he's talking about this right here, and so on. So those are nice ways that you can break it down, and anyone here can do something like that using like the services that I mentioned. So that's a very easy thing to do once you get into it. But so now, as far as the different resources go with email, as I mentioned, MailChimp is a great one that allows for this, and collecting email addresses is easy. They allow it to where you can actually embed forms from them. Like you can grab a form from them for your list and put it onto your church website, which makes it nice and simple. And always, as I said, you can use things like connect cards or even things that you just pass out to people who even are current members and just let them know what you want to do. Now, a major thing with email is just you have to be consistent in how you do it. So however frequently you choose to send emails out, whatever subject matter you plan to put with your emails, you want to make sure that you're consistent in doing so that it sets expectations for people. If they understand like, hey, my church is going to send me an email every week with the information about what's going on at the church, information that's pertinent to me about, maybe upcoming events or something just happening in terms of like, what's going on with volunteer opportunities and things like that. Those are great things to include in something like that you could do on a weekly basis. And think especially too for all those people who aren't making it to every service. This is an opportunity where even if they can't come and hear the announcements or get the bulletin or anything like that, like they're still being delivered this information so they know what's happening and they're kept in the loop that way. And as far as email goes too, like the reason it's so popular is because so many people are still using it all the time. I know for me, like I'm checking my email probably, well, way more than I should throughout the day. I just can't help it. Like I see on my phone, my emails come in, and probably about like 10 times a day at least. Throughout the period, I'll just check to make sure if there's anything that I need to look at right then. And then if there's something I'm like, oh, I want to see what this says, I just bookmark it for myself later and check it when I get off work or whatever's happening then. So there's stuff like that going on where we're just creatures of habit and we check our emails constantly. And I know some people will worry like, oh, I don't want to like spam somebody. I don't want to send them too much information. And I get that. I totally understand that. And if that's something that you're worried about, like, with my group, but think of this too. The people who are going to unsubscribe, they're going to unsubscribe. They're not interested. They're not interested in the information, and they're not really beneficial to have on the list if they're not actually reading the content anyway. And then secondly, like think of the people who are missing out on those services or missing out on that weekly information otherwise. And so this is providing them an avenue where they can still stay plugged in without necessarily having to remember to go check the website or go check on the social media page or anything like that. So it's just an avenue that I think that more churches should probably explore and use more often. And I see the ones that do use it often tend to have more success with it than those who spread it out real thin. So those are just some things to keep in mind. All right, so let's talk a bit now about mobile apps. So mobile apps have quickly become a standard platform that offers better engagement than most others out there in terms of like against your church website, anything like that. I want to share with you guys a little bit. So with mobile apps, I actually have the opportunity myself to go and speak at some conferences throughout the year as part of Sharefaith and Sharefaith Academy, and get to talk with people who are church leaders and volunteers and staff members. And so it's been a great opportunity to be able to go and talk to them about like what they're doing as far as how they're communicating, what tools and resources they're using, what they're doing to equip their volunteers, which will be something we'll talk a bit more to as we get into this webinar. But one of the things that I often ask is I'll say, okay, who here has a church that has a mobile app, or goes to a church that has a mobile app? And so oftentimes I'm seeing about anywhere from 25%, a quarter to a third of the audience will raise their hands at that point. So it's something that, it's not like widespread, every church has one, but you're starting to see a larger adoption of it. So I'm like, okay, I said, so who here prefers to use their app over their website? And at all these conferences I've been to, I only had one person put their hand down during a time. And I asked him, I just said, okay, well, I'm just curious, why is that you go to your website instead of your mobile app? And his answer, well, I don't have the app installed. That's the only reason he didn't use the app. He knew his church had one, he just hadn't installed it. Everybody else there whose church had an app, they had it installed. And I asked them, I said, why is it that you prefer to use the app over your website? And they said, because it's faster and it's easier. It's something where that information comes to them. It is just stuff that they care about. It's just things that they want to be able to do. They can go in there, they can listen to the most previous sermon recording. If there's any event announcements, that's real easy to plug in there. And they have the option to be able to go and give real quick in there. I know I've been to a church that has an app before, and it was real nice to be able to just jump into the app, and then there's the online giving right there. I can just plug into it and be able to do it. So apps have grown more popular because you'll find that as people adopt them, as people in your congregation download them, they're going to use them more frequently than most other methods of online communication out there. The other nice thing about them, I don't want to go too far. Let's jump into some of the bullet points I have here on the slide. Chris, if you don't mind switching it back over to my screen. Thank you. Get to talking, and I just want to go off on all of it. So engagement-wise, and this is an interesting statistic, 10 times more likely to engage with an app instead of a website. People who are regular members, who actively stay involved with the church, they're 10 times more likely to engage with your app over your church website. Notifications are a huge thing that apps provide. So this is a part that I really like about this. Whenever something gets added to an app, I get notified of it right away. And this is the way church apps work anyway, where if a new sermon's available to listen to, I get a push notification, my phone chirps at me, I can see, oh hey, last week's sermon is on there. If there's an event announcement, if they want to remind people about stuff, like this is a great way, like on my phone, which is on me all the time, I can get a notification of what's going on at church as it happens. So push notifications are an awesome reason for apps as well. And then it's also something where, as I mentioned, the information there is relevant. It's something that you people who are part of your church, they're the ones downloading your app, and they're the ones who are going to find the information they're looking for on there. It's like, okay, great. Here's where I can go to give online. Here's where I can go to get the latest sermon. Here's where I can go to get the latest reminders and announcements about events going on. So all that information is pertinent to them, and that's why they're going to want the app over the website, whereas the website, they have to go type in the address, go find the website, jump to the page that has the information they're looking for. It's not a hard process, but we like it easy, and it's faster and easier through an app to do that. All right, so now here's one that I know, I'm sure most everybody here probably has some experience with, working with announcement slides in your church. So this is a big part of communication. People who come to the church, you have their attention at this point because they're there for your church to be able to listen to the service and be a part of it. And so this is a great time, obviously, when you want to let them know what's happening. So announcement slides are a big deal that we can't overlook. So with announcements, there's a few different ways that we can present things. We have the slide option where we just have the information up against a background, or maybe just even up on the screen as it is, where people can see what's going on. I do recommend typically having a graphic associated with your announcements because that just helps that information be retained more easily as it goes. Videos. This is a huge one that we are seeing more and more churches adopt and have more success with. And I love seeing churches who have new videos updated all the time. You see video announcements even where leadership will come up and be able to talk about what's going on. I just this past week, it was great because one of our leaders at the church, one of our pastors, who's our worship leader, he actually helped make a video talking about the small groups program at our church. And I thought it was great because it really gave me a chance to get a better insight into what the small groups were about and how they operated and what the heart was behind them. So as a member of the congregation, I had a chance to connect more with the small groups and understand it, and it gave me a better idea of, like, if I'm looking at doing something with small groups, like, now I have a greater understanding, and of course I can go talk to him more about it as if I'm interested in diving in deeper into that. But it gave me a better sense of, like, okay, now I could really see where this would apply to me and how I can be a part of it. So I thought the video announcement was used really well for that this last Sunday. And of course, you guys might have other things going on where you have a person coming up and just listing out, like, hey, these are all the great things that are about to happen, or hey, this is just a video showing you different things that's going on. There's ways that video can engage more, that takes people out of the church again to be able to see more of what you're really talking about and see the impact is of what you're referring to. And then printed. We're going to talk more about print here in a little bit, and you guys are going to be like, print? But I know a lot of people, when I surveyed some folks about this, there was a large amount that were actually very interested to see what's going on with what we can do with print and how that can be applied more today. So I do have some thoughts I want to share on print. But printing announcements, of course, is still very effective because it gives them something that they can be able to refer to at a later date as well. If they walk out and they go, when was that event again? Or what do I have to do to sign up? Or how much is this going to be? Or anything like that. So having that is just a nice thing to have. All right, live streaming. So this is a fun one. So live streaming is really starting to kind of take the world by storm. Lots of stuff going on with the streaming industry. We're seeing lots of stuff in terms of social streaming with Facebook and YouTube, and Twitter had Periscope, still has Periscope, I should say. I shouldn't talk about it like it's a past thing. It's still going on. So there's lots of things going on there with streaming. Now, streaming is a cool thing. I'm going to talk about, like, more of the application understanding of, like, why streaming can be such a great tool of communication for you guys. So first of all, switch back here so you can see. So streaming, whether it's not necessarily the same, of course. Nothing's going to replace actually being there in the service, but it's a way of keeping community with others, because you think about the people who can't make it to service that week. Maybe they're sick, maybe they're traveling, perhaps they're working. but they have an opportunity to still be a part of the service by watching the stream and understand what's going on. Also, thinking of like how things are happening on social media, and people can come on and actually see like what's occurring at your church right then and understand the environment and everything that your church has to offer. So there's a sense of community that streaming provides to those who are remote, and being able to bridge some of those gaps for those people where they can still be connected and involved with the church. Your culture. So being able to share the culture of your church is a huge thing too. Streaming allows you the opportunity where people can see things as they happen. They can see the service. They can see worship. Sometimes if you have the right licenses to be able to broadcast worship music, you want to look into that. But then, so there are opportunities there where you can share your culture with others who maybe have not been to the church before and are interested in learning more about it, and they can really see what's happening there. And then, of course, I've talked a lot about sharing, and I think that's definitely one of the most powerful things about it. Now with social media making streaming such a big deal, and the ability to simultaneously stream your services across your Facebook, across YouTube, Periscope, on your church website, everything you have access to, you can go through and be able to connect through that. Different systems and services are out there that can do different things, but a lot of them nowadays have that ability where you can go cross-platform and be able to get your message out there as far as you can, increase your outreach as much as possible, and be able to do so in a way that really reflects these other two things, the community and culture of your church. All right, so now we'll get into printable materials. So with printable materials, and I put a little tagline on here for you guys, print's not dead. So printable materials, there's 4 different ones that I want to just touch on a little bit that I feel are still valuable materials that we should still consider very much in our communication. We're going to talk about bulletins, flyers, the Connect cards idea that I brought up, and signage that we have around our church. So with bulletins or pamphlets that you're using in your service, one thing is, as we are adopting, I know so many churches, and I've talked, with other churches too, who are like really looking at like, how can I digitize this? How can I just make print bulletins go away? Because the things we don't like about bulletins is that oftentimes we don't have any way to track their effectiveness. We just print these things out. Everybody shows up. Ushers and greeters hand them out at the door, or we have them on the table for people to pick up as they go by. However you guys are delivering that. And so all of this is happening, but then we don't know, like, did they actually like get the information off of that? Or are they coming to any of these things? Are they seizing any of the opportunities we presented in? What is this information helpful? And some of that stuff you can only do by just actually surveying your people and understanding, what their thoughts are on it. But also, with it, there are other ways that we can include more calls to action within the bulletins so that people can, bring those with them if they're going to an event to be able to get something as they go. There's different things you can do. You can put your website on there. You can put links to things that they can put in. We'll talk a bit more about more effective ways to provide links and stuff here in a bit off of printed materials. But so bulletins are a big one still that I think like it's not at the point yet where we can just completely cut print out, because there's just times when nobody has any connection with us online. They haven't been to our website, they don't go on social media, they don't have the app downloaded, and so you need a way that you can still communicate to them as they walk through the doors about what's all going on at your church. Flyers and posters. So this is more of a fun thing. There's definitely things you can do inside the church that can make things more fun. I've seen kids' wings that have really fun posters that they do, like based around sermon series they're looking at. Or you can actually use it too as a way of like announcing like, hey, these are our Bible studies that are happening. This is an event that we have going on. We're doing a fundraiser here. We're doing a barbecue this weekend. Whatever it might be going on. Flyers and posters are a great way to just post something up on the wall in a clearly visible location where they can see it. And of course, not just at your church campus, but also around the community where it's legal. Make sure you're going somewhere where you can go. I remember being in college and going around, and even when, websites were already, we're already like in full swing and you got most of your information online, like I would go around and I'd see these things that I would have never thought to look up on my own happening at churches and other organizations around the community, up on the bulletin boards at the colleges, up in these areas where it's just like people are passing by these things all throughout the day, and you know people's eyes are getting caught by these things so they can see what's happening. So don't discount this as an option for being able to do something. If it's in the budget where you can afford to print some more resources to get the word out about things, like these are still an effective means for some people. And again, you can do different things to make it, to provide a call to action. You can have little tearaway things at the bottom that people can take off and bring with them. You can have them call a number. You can have them, send an email or, follow a link or whatever. So there's different ways that we can make this so you can still track some of the effectiveness of how well this is working. Connect cards. So connect cards, and I don't know if anybody here might have experience with working with connection cards. It's something that I see at some churches, not at others. It just kind of depends. But these are nice because it allows the opportunity for someone to provide their information. If somebody's giving you one of these back filled out, it means they're genuinely interested in hearing more from your church. They want to know what's going on. They want to be able to follow along with what's happening, and they want you to contact them with information they find that's relevant to them. So either you can have it as just a general, here's the things that we need from you if you want us to contact us. You can have it be more specific if you want to break it down and say, what would you like to learn more about? And have them check a box. Men's ministry, women's ministry, children's ministry, outreach events, volunteer opportunities, the list goes on. So you can break it down based on what your church offers and what their needs are and allow them the opportunity to say, this is what I want to be more a part of at this church. And so connect cards are still a nice way to do that. Now, it just depends, I guess, on the event and what's happening. You might find sometimes where they're effective and sometimes where they're not. I can tell you, from my own personal experience, just a little bit of my testimony. When I went to a church, I was coming out of the service and I was already just like, wow, okay, God is doing something in me right now. And if it wasn't for somebody who was there in the lobby who turned around and gave me a card that had information about a small group that I could go to, that was a huge turning point for me in my walk with the Lord, where I got plugged into a church and had the opportunity to learn more about Him with other like-minded believers. So just my own take, I personally feel like these are still an effective thing. Even if you don't see them in droves coming back to you with information, it can make a big difference for those who are just looking for an opportunity to find a way to plug in with your church. And then signs and banners, signage around your church. So I don't necessarily mean the things we see on Facebook all the time of the funny signs out in the street. Those definitely, there's definitely a process to that as well. And those signs can be great tools to be able to get people to be interested in learning more and coming to a church service. But I'm talking about once they actually come in. We had this problem at my church that I used to go to where people would come in and it was just nothing was labeled. No, you just walked into the building, you're like, okay, where's the sanctuary? Where are the bathrooms? Where do I take my kids when I come in here? It can be just something where you, as a person who goes and walks the halls of your church all the time, you are just that's obvious. You just go over here, or follow the sound of the screaming and laughing children over here if you want to get there. But having properly labeled things for signage makes a big difference for when somebody comes in. They don't have to stress about that kind of stuff. They can just feel okay, now I know where everything is. Follow the map or follow the way the arrows are pointing, follow the signs as they lead so I can get to where I'm looking to go. So don't overlook that either. And there are so many cool ways we can do signs these days. I love some of the signs we have at our church, the way it's set up. And I know you see some of the examples here. These are just some sample signs I've seen, but these are so fun to have up, and it really just gives a sense of professionalism too. When you walk into a place, it looks almost like a conference center. When you walk in, you're like, wow, okay, this is a really cool thing talking about this upcoming event or this ongoing service or this opportunity here. So those are things to keep in mind. Now, I've talked a lot about how to provide calls to action, how to allow people to engage with different things in a digital sense, connecting that digital and print world. So before I get into this, I'm going to say, as soon as I bring it up, don't run this is so old and outdated and everything on this next thing I'm going to bring up, because you probably think that for a second, but I want to tell you some interesting developments that come with it. So I'm going to talk about the resurgence of scan codes, or you might have heard of them as QR codes and so forth. So there are some interesting things going on right now with scan codes that are actually making it have a comeback. Believe it or not, here we are in 2017 still talking about these things. I know, I've argued with coworkers about this all the time because I've kind of been seeing this for a while, looking around, researching, seeing what's going on with things here, and I've had other people just tell me, Zach, you're crazy, nobody scans those anymore, nobody does anything with it. But check it out. So there's some new developments happening. Right now, Apple has finally made it where you can just open up your camera app on your phone or your iPad and it will know how to scan a QR code. It took them years of research and development apparently, but they figured out how to do it. You can actually open up your camera. You don't have to have a special app anymore on Apple devices to be able to just go in and scan a code. So that is nice because it's made it more convenient. But why do I think that people will do it? Well, there's more things happening in the world in terms of marketing and education that are teaching people more and more to use scan codes and to look for them. Now, this is an example of a QR code. Yes, this works perfectly. There's nothing wrong with it. But a lot of people have complained it is a little bit ugly. It's not necessarily the prettiest thing to put on your product, right? And I think a lot of the issues, too, that we've seen in the past are where companies that just have no idea how to use these things. Like, sure, you can put a scan code on, but what do you do? Like, send them to a YouTube video? Do you send them to your website? Do you take them to your social media page? Like, what's got to happen here? So I'm going to talk about some different uses for the scan code that churches can actually benefit heavily from by putting these things on your bulletins, on your flyers, on your signage, in different areas like that. So the first one I want to bring up is obviously connecting to your website or even your mobile app. So you can have the option where somebody goes and they see on your bulletin it has your website address listed. Rather than having to type that in, they can just pull up their camera on their phone, or if they're still on an Android, I think you still need an app for that. I'm an iPhone user, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But then you can go in and be able to just scan it and then boom, go right into the website and be able to connect. They see it, so it's an instant reaction that they have. They don't have to wait till they get home or remember to see the bulletin and be like, oh yeah, I want to check this out later. Or have to type it in the phone while you're trying to say something during announcements and they completely forget about it. So having something like that where they can instantly connect to that is obviously one way that you can use something like that, and also a great way to prompt someone to download your app. So again, we were talking about that better engagement factor that the app has. This is a great way to get your congregation on board. If like, hey, we have an app, just download it here, just scan it, there you go. Online giving. So this is a great way too, because if somebody comes through, like picture this, I know a lot of churches nowadays still use tithing envelopes, or they have something on their bulletin or any type of way that people can like put in money in to be able to pass along. So instead of that, you can put a scan code on these things and be able to scan it, and it takes them right to your giving form. So they can go out there, fill in their information, or users can create an account for themselves so they don't have to do that every single time. They can just scan it and boom, done. So that's another way to make giving simpler for people and have it connected to a digital platform where they can put in credit cards and debit cards and whatever they're using, which is what most people are using these days now anyway. Registering for events. So when you're registering for an event for something, like having a flyer about like an upcoming retreat is great, but then imagine there's an option like, hey, just scan here to sign up. So then they do that, and then boom, they can just put their details in, and now you've got an instant sign up from that, rather than somebody going, oh, that looks like fun, walk away, 3 days later, oh yeah, I meant to sign up for that, now I don't have the information in front of me though. You know, this kind of stuff that happens all the time, unfortunately, because we're human. But having something like that where somebody can just go boom and instantly register for an event is another huge plus. And I think this would be fun, dynamic greetings. This is kind of more of a fun thing, obviously not as functional as some of the other stuff, but I think it's great if you have something like this where, say somebody comes to your church as a new visitor and they have the opportunity, you can make a video for them so that they can go and it opens up into YouTube or wherever you have this posted at, and they can see right then and there, you know, like, oh, a fun greeting from the pastor about like, hey, we're so glad you came today. These are the things that we want to share with you as you're here at our church. We hope that you'll feel welcome. Here's some opportunities as a new visitor where you can go in and be able to, you know, so on and so forth. So there's different ways that you could make something like this. I think it would be a fantastic way to welcome people, and so I think scan codes are a good way to kind of bridge the gap as someone comes in and then be able to and is able to see this on their bulletin or on whatever your handouts are for your new visitors and be able to go in. So now, speaking of new visitors, let's take a little time and spend on that because we're only about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure I get enough time for Q&A. So we're down to the last thing I just want to share with you. And I appreciate you guys so much for staying with us. And I see Chris is typing away over there, so it's good to see the discussion happening. So we'll go ahead and get into this. All right, so engaging new visitors. I know this is something that churches we always want to be better at, right? We want to be better about like being welcoming and engaging new visitors, because one aspect of communication is reaching the people outside of the church and getting them to come to church, and then it's a whole new ballgame once they actually walk through the doors, and now you want to be able to engage them and help them to feel welcome, but also familiar with the church and understand, you know, whether or not this church is the right fit for them. So with new visitors, let's talk a bit about the idea of a new visitor station, which some churches have. Others will have like a connect station, or maybe even just like a thing where they have an opportunity to meet someone afterwards. But I know I see this a lot in different churches where you have a station set up where people who are new can come and learn about the church. So the first thing, and this goes back to what I said, there's nothing you can ever do to replace a real person when it comes to communication. I know I heard a testimony of someone before sharing about how when they were looking to get plugged into a church, they went to one of our local churches, and there was a new visitor station there that was set up, and it had all this information, all these printouts and different things they could look at about stuff going on, but there was no one there at the station. There was nobody there where they could actually talk to, who could say hello, who could answer questions, who could provide a face that they could coordinate with all this. So there was none of that there. And so they said that they got there, they saw some of the materials, they were like, okay, this is good information. But they were looking around because they had questions. And as they were going around asking people, like people were like, oh, I don't know about that. You have to ask someone else. That's not me. And it's like, what a bad experience, right? And so that was a thing for them too. The person sharing with me, she would tell me like, we just realized it wasn't where we wanted to be because there was no one that we could talk to, and we didn't felt it was very alienated, and even though that was there, it just didn't help in the long run. So that's something to be mindful of, is to have something where it's always manned with a real person who can interact and engage people. Bulletins. So we talked about this, and this is something that, of course, is great to have a new visitor station. If they walk through, if they come in at a time where the greeters aren't necessarily there by the doors, or however your facility is set up, it might be a good idea just to have some extra bulletins laid out so they don't miss that, so that information is readily available. I like this idea of swag. You're starting to see churches now that incorporate swag. Swag is just free stuff, cool free stuff that they can get, whether it's bookmarks, whether it's a pen or a pencil, things that just have essentially like the church branding on it so they can coordinate with it. You may even have something where like, hey, if you fill this information out for us, we'll give you this awesome coffee cup or this awesome t-shirt or something like that. You can think of ways to incentivize where people can get more and people are just love it. So I think a swag is a great way too. You've seen a lot more churches kind of hop on with that and getting stuff like that put out there. And there's lots of companies out there that will just work with churches in providing those materials. If you can give them what you're wanting as far as a design or a logo to put on that stuff, it's real easy to do. And then at a visitor station, there should be opportunities to get plugged in further. This is where it kind of is more the connect station mentality. Like, hey, this is where we have volunteer opportunities at. If you want to learn about how you can become a part of those things, this is where you can learn about how it is, like what's involved in becoming a full-blown member of the church. What do we have as far as different options there? I really love one of the things that our church does is called a pastor's coffee, where every month people have the opportunity to go to the coffee station we have at the church and actually get to hear from the pastor himself about what the heart and mission and vision is of the church, different opportunities that are available. You get to ask questions with them and you get to actually meet the leadership. It's not this really like behind the curtain thing where it's just like, oh, they're only up on stage and that's it. So it really personalizes the experience for people. So no matter how big the church gets, we have the opportunity to be plugged in that way. So I love that opportunity as well. Okay, so we're getting close here. We're getting to the end. It's already a few minutes. We might be running a little late if you guys are okay. I want to stick around and make sure we have time to answer your questions. So why do people stay? This is a question. It's like we ask ourselves, like, okay, so people who are staying, why do they stay? What could be the reason that they're not staying? So I made this handy-dandy chart for you guys to kind of look at. This is a survey. This is a Pew Research survey on what factors have the biggest influence on a person's decision to stay at the church. The first one, and this is probably no surprise to a lot of people, is sermon quality. Just what people think about the sermons, how they view the pastor, how they view the teaching, stuff like that is considered the biggest influence. The second one, feeling welcomed. This goes back to the story I just told about the person at the visitor station. There was nobody there that really gave them a sense of feeling welcome. Real people there in the lobby or wherever they are accessible and that they can engage and be able to represent the church for those coming who are wanting to learn more. your service style, the location, children's ministry, family and friends, and volunteer opportunities. Even though it's down at the bottom of this list, it's still way up there. Over 40% are looking for volunteer opportunities. So that's nice to know that there's still a large amount of people who are coming to services and they want to get plugged in. They want to find those opportunities where they can help and not just be a spectator or somebody who just comes and provides a butt in the seat, as we say, during service, but also being able to help out around there as well. So this is great information, and I will share this slide with you guys afterwards, so you'll have a record of this.
And you can always lock them in.
And you can always, just lock them in. Just don't let them out. Pretty sure Fire Marshal would not be appreciative of that, but, oops, my text broke here. Sorry, guys. Switch things over. I didn't have the right font on this one. So communication timeline. So basically, I just wanted to take a moment to kind of go through a few things in our communication timeline with people and kind of break it down in a sense of the overall big picture of church communication. The first step is discovery. When somebody learns about the church, however that's done, they're searching online, they're asking friends and family, they're trying to investigate and find a church. That's, whether maybe they're just driving by and they see the building and they go, that's it, I want to go in there one of these days. So the discovery of the church is the first step of engagement with the person. Then after that, we have research. So typically somebody will come in and they will, after they've learned about the church, they're going to be like, okay, what is this church about? What do they do? They'll go online. They'll check out the website. They'll look at the social media. They'll Google, for nearby locations and see what all is around there. They'll see if maybe anybody they know personally has gone to the church before and has anything to say about it. So the researching part from them. And then after that, attendance. So now they actually attend, right? They've made that decision like, okay, I've looked into it. This seems like it could be a good fit. I want to go and learn about what they have to say, or maybe this is somewhere where I just I need to go somewhere because I am recognizing my relationship with God is not what it should be, and so they're attending your church in person. Then after they attend, they're connecting. So as they are connecting with your church, that's where they're starting to get plugged in. They're learning about how to become a member. They may be seeing what they can do to help out around the church. Discipleship happens through this process as they are growing closer to God through the teachings that are happening at your church. And so this is the opportunity where you have someone who has attended, who wants to be plugged in and be a part of things, and they're getting a chance to really become a child of God. And then lastly, a huge part is evangelism, in a sense where they are not only sharing stuff about your church to others to let them come, but they're also sharing the Word of God with others, and that's how they're effectively reproducing what's been given to them through your church. And so throughout all of this, I just say to stay kingdom focused. Everything that you communicate as a church should always keep this end goal in mind, that you want to make disciples, then make disciples, then make disciples, as they say. So with that, it's already almost noon, so I want to make sure I have time for some questions and answers for you guys if there are any. I know there's a lot of information. Again, I'm going to share notes with you guys afterwards, so I appreciate you all for sticking with us, and hopefully there's been some good stuff here that you guys have learned about, and then we'll take care of some of these now. So what kinds of questions have you been getting, Chris?
We've been answering Tim, our media director. He hopped in online.
Oh, fun.
Interrupted everything I was saying.
Okay.
No, it's a good thing. He's answered a bunch of questions.
Okay.
Pretty much all the questions have been answered.
Okay, great.
And
well, do you have some examples? I'd love to hear kind of some of the stuff that people have been asking about.
Okay, well, let me go back up here.
Sounds like everybody got a chance to kind of get to know Tim a little bit. That's cool. Tim has worked a long time in church media and communication, so he is a great guy. I know I asked him some stuff too, some different things he shared with me before coming into the webinar as well, and he has a lot of great insight and experience with that.
Some of the things they were talking about is where they could get resources to make their videos.
Okay.
And we had various different things. I explained that some people do it using their presentation software and then export it as an MP4.
Okay.
Tim had said, Ben Moore on the chat had said Adobe After Effects and different things like that he's used, and actually gave some links, which is really nice. We also had somebody.
So lots of good Lots of good discussion going on in there. Okay.
We also had somebody ask about QR codes,
Uh-huh.
how to get them, how to generate them, and Tim supplied them with a link right before I was going to.
Right. Oh, yeah. I know. I'm sure you were right on it, Chris.
I was like right there.
Hopefully everyone's hearing what Chris is saying. So.
They are.
Okay.
There, I can hear it through my headphones. One other thing is when you were talking about tithing.
Yes.
One of the really great things for people when they do give online, people that normally like to give online, still like to put something in the offering plate. One of the ideas that we've had is to have a little note that says I gave online.
Sure. So there are some things where I've seen churches that do that, where if you're in a church that has online giving available, and as Chris is saying, some people still like to put something in, and they don't. There's just this sense, right? It's just like it's going by, like, and I am tithing, like I really am. And I don't know if that's just like our own like selfishness, like thinking like around our peers, like people are like thinking, but we know our church community better than I'm sure you guys know your church community better than anybody else. But as far as that goes, like sure, that's an option where, and especially for people who maybe are not there as long or whatever, like they can put something in that just says, I gave online, or there's something that they're just acknowledging like, yes, I am giving to the church and that is happening. So I know some people may have different opinions on something like that, but that is an option if you feel that that's something your congregation would feel better about, and just what they're working with. So
another person asked about social media. So they have people that don't want to be involved in social media, so they were wondering if they would still download an app.
Oh, so if somebody is perhaps not wanting to be involved in social media, if they would still download an app? That's a good question. I feel that's probably something that's maybe more particular to that individual and how they would treat that. I can say the nice thing about it is it's not something where you have to go into social media and just see all this junk on your feed if that's something that you're concerned about. It's really just very specific, relevant information. So, we see things where, statistically there's not huge differences anymore between those who, in age groups and different demographics who are all using apps these days and using smartphones and everything. So having something like that available to them, at the very least, you're providing them an opportunity where you can give them a platform that does that. All right. Well, before we go, I just want to let you guys know, thank you again so much for joining us, and I'm so appreciative of all the time you guys have been taking with us on the chat and discussions and everything. Before we go, I just wanted to give you guys a reminder. So this is Thanksgiving weekend, and I hope you guys have a blessed Thanksgiving. Eat lots of turkey. Take lots of naps if you can. But don't forget to look out. Black Friday is coming. Lots of sales and different things happening on that. There's big things coming on down the pipeline. So be sure to look out. We'll send you guys some helpful resources in the follow-up. So look for my email tomorrow. I'll make sure you guys get some notes from this webinar. We will have a replay available for those of you who came in late, who would like to share it with others so they can check into it. So we'll have all that available to you guys tomorrow. So be sure to stay on the lookout for that email. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. And let me pray for you before you head out, and then we'll let you go. Father God, I thank you so much for this time today. I pray, Lord, that the information here was just going to be such a blessing to those who came and who are a part of it. I pray that there's lots of good stuff they can take away from this, whether it was in the presentation or in the discussion with the others. I thank you that as the body of Christ, we can come together and help each other. And we all have that same goal, Lord, that same desire to see lives transformed for Christ, to see God glorified in our efforts. So I ask, Lord, that you would bless everyone here mightily in that pursuit, that we would all be focused on that, and everything we would do would be to the glory of God. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thank you guys again so much, and looking forward to seeing you guys next time. We'll let you know as more opportunities come along for webinars and different events happening here at Sharefaith Academy. And until then, God bless you guys and have a great Thanksgiving.